All right, so I went and saw it twice, and I'm ready to share. As a multicultural black person, I think the telling of the story of like a lone survivor is really relatable and impactful for me. And then I'm always really in conversation in my thoughts with my ancestors about the past, about Jim Crow, about slavery, about a lot of those time periods. So to see a movie set in Clarksdale, Mississippi, 1932, I think about, for me, the really impactful piece of that movie was Sammy coming back to the church, bloodied and bruised, but specifically coming back alone. And now we expected that, he was the only one technically headed to church that morning. But I really think about it in terms of like that time period of the terror of Jim Crow. And when I think about what that could mean to, be a survivor with all the traumatic ways that, you know, white folks use lynchings and um, discrimination laws and black codes and all that type of stuff. Like the idea or the concept of being attacked by white people, and if there's only one of us left, that there's all this horror in our history, right? And a lot of times I imagine that there may not have been survivors, especially of very specific events within lynchings. I think that only someone like uninvolved that watched the story could, probably go tell about the brutality that someone experienced. I've often thought about my ancestors in situations, or our collective ancestors in situations where there probably was someone that escaped or was released for the purpose of being only one survivor to, run and tell, like, don't, like, well, let's not build, especially when I think about like Tulsa massacres, all of the black towns that were drowned every time, black Wall Street, every time black folks tried to build community for themselves, what do white folks come and do? And there's so much of that we are uncovering now, which for me makes me understand that the survivors of that, there couldn't have been a lot, or I think those things would have been a lot more widespread understandings. And those survivors must have been the ones to warn people of Jim Crow terrors outside of like the physical bodies that were left to be warnings. And so then I think it's really interesting that the end of the movie shows Sammy toward the end of his life, in regards to then having lived a long life from that situation where he was probably barely, I don't know that they talked about his age, but he couldn't have been barely 18 and 23, at the most. So then I was thinking about myself from my own situation, but also then from a historical ancestral space of then, after you survive something like that, you're moving into a new stage of life without all of these people that you looked forward to growing up with. Thinking about all of the enslaved people whose children didn't make it, and then you still have to live your life after that. Like, you still have to move forward as a piece of property. What grieving is, how do you grieve, how you probably are not able to truly grieve in those ways unless you have the community around you to support you with that. That imagery of Sammy really put this understanding of like the devastation, like of losing everybody you're unable to bring them back. Like, I mean, thinking about those moments when certain people were getting bit, as soon as you get bit, that person is done for. Like, there's nothing you can do. You have to live now knowing that they're not gonna, or like, I have to either stake you or kill you, or run from you, And then that trauma Sammy even talked about, you can still be living your life really going, like, you're still unhealed from that, but you still have to live your life. The man, old and near his deathbed and still talking about nightmares. I mean, of course, for this, the imagery makes sense, but it's like, I think also like you can be a survivor that heals from it, and you can be a survivor that just lives through it too. I saw a lot of people saying that they really wish Annie could have lived, and I think that there may be like an alternate universe of sinners where Annie could have lived, but then I think it begs the question of what kind of life would that have been after, to then live with the trauma of the attack on the juke joint. So even if Annie and Smoke had lived, now Stack is dead. I think, not that they can't move on, But I think that the art really tingles my brain in the sense of like, but then what would that have been? Like, it would have just continued to be this cycle of 1932 Clarksdale, especially when we find out that they were going to attack the Jew joint anyway, and the Klan wasn't going to let them have that business as a thriving business for years to come. And so I think even better, or something that I would have really loved to see, is that it would have been impactful if the promise that Smoke made to Annie about saving her soul, I think that should have been applied to everybody. Like, cause when we're talking about freedom, what good is freedom if you have no soul? I think that's even where, when we're talking a lot about this remix stuff, like, what good is forever if I have to steal from people to have forever? If I have nothing for myself. But like, if my soul is intact, I can join my ancestors. I can be reborn. Maybe I don't want to be reborn. Maybe I don't want to really try this again, but I could be at peace with my loved ones. I think I would have loved to see them save Pearline's soul. And I think that would have made it where it would have made it possible for Smoke to kill Stack. I think that it was impossible for him to do because he didn't have that same spiritual connection to understanding what that means to lose your soul. But then when he goes to join his family and ancestors with his baby and his loved one and his woman, his brother's not going to be there. So then that even takes me into, even with that, even with all of the survivor and all of the ways that, like, I'm here because of people, we're all here because of people who survived. Those people still survived and lost so much. And so many people that we'll probably never know about. And they just didn't make it. So, like, on one end, it's like, shout out to us, the ones who've made it, but, like, whoa. I also feel what Sammy said of just, like, I think I've had about enough of this place. I really think this story was such a brain teaser, such a brain tingler with all the ways that we are having to understand, even in real time as things are happening right outside. Still, we're still surviving. It just doesn't look quite like 1932 Clarksdale, Mississippi.